The history of the Philippines pre-colonial period. The Philippines pre-colonial period was filled with indigenous peoples engaged in healthy trade with various cultures and economics in the regions and the foreign traders.
The education of pre-colonial period in the Philippines. In the ancient Philippines, children were given the rudiments of education. Such education was both academic and vocation. During the pre-colonial period, most children were provided with solely vocational training, which was supervised by the parents, tribal tutors, or those assigned for specific, specialized roles within their communities. For examples are the babaylans.
This is the characteristic of pre-colonial period. 1. Based on oral tradition. 2. Rooted on ideology and physiology. 3. Consistent of both written and oral literature. 4. Language of oral literature was the language of daily life. 5. Earliest alphabet, Alibata of Osecan origin, consistent of 17 letters, 3 vowels, plus 14 consonants.
This is the goal of pre-colonial period education in the Philippines. Pre-colonial period focuses the goal of education was the survival, conformity, and inculturation, by which means of informal education, practical and theoretical training.
The Spanish period.
The Spanish period happened on 1521 to 1869. As Spain started colonizing the Philippines, Spanish missionaries had a significant impact on how the Filipino people were educated and governed. Spain used religion as the tactic to conquer the Philippines and turn it into a colony. Compared to what the Filipinos had prior to the arrival of the Spaniards, the Philippines curriculum at that time was significantly more regimented. Nonetheless, the curriculum for Spanish classes placed more of a focus on religion than a fundamental literacy, science, and the arts.
For the characteristic of education during Spanish era are: number 1, education was formal and organized this time. Number 2, schools focused on religious. Number 3, Christian doctrine, sacred songs, and prayer were taught because they required for confessions and communion. Number 4, separate school for boys and girls. And lastly, for number 5 is memorization.
This is the goal of Spanish education in the Philippines, to make the native Filipinos obedient and God-fearing Christian. For this reason, religion was compulsory subject for all levels from primary school to university. Eventually, the Baybayin script was replaced by the Latin script, as this became increasingly more useful and widespread.
American period.
Now, let's talk about education on American period in the Philippines. But first, let us talk about the history of education in American period. During the U.S. colonial period in the Philippines, on the year 1898 to 1946, the U.S. government was responsible for providing education to the citizens of the Philippines. Education was very important to the United States colonial government because it allowed them to spread their cultural values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. This led to the formation of a national identity and Filipino nationalism.
And now, this is the characteristics of American period. During the American period, there were 3 levels of education: elementary, secondary, and college. Elementary school consisted of 4 primary years and 3 intermediate years. Secondary school consisted of 4 years, and college was the 3rd level. Religion was not part of the curriculum of the schools. Thomasites stands as educators in the American period. The Thomasites were a group of 600 American teachers who traveled from the United States to the newly occupied territory of the Philippines on the U.S. Army Transport Thomas. And they contradict the Spanish missionaries and the religious teachings. And last, the Americans did not make religious instruction compulsory. Under US law, religious education is forbidden in public schools, except from a neutral academic perspective. However, in a minority of communities, release time is granted once a week to make religious education more convenient without violating the separation of church and state.
Now, let's talk about the goal of education in American period. Educational goal during American period is to promote democratic ideals and way of life, formation of good citizens including the rights and responsibilities of people. Teach democracy. The American teach us to be democratic. The power to elect our leaders is on our hands. In democracy, people have the right to choose their rulers. If rulers do not work well, people will not elect them in the next election. Democracy has more freedom of speech than any other forms of government. Separation of church and state. The separation of church and state prohibits the state from interfering in church matters and prohibits the state from having a state religion. It does not imply a division between belief and public actions, between moral principles and political choices. Lastly, Westernization. The American wants us to be westernized to adapt their culture.
The Japanese regime.
The history of Japanese curriculum in the Philippines. According to the Military Order Number 2, the Philippine Executive Commission established the Commission on Education, Health, and Public Welfare, and they reopened the schools to those who want to learn on June 1942, which has a total of 300,000 students. The characteristics of the history of Japanese curriculum is 1. Realizations of new order and promote friendly relations between Japan and Philippines to the farthest extent. 2. Foster a new Filipino culture base. 3. Endeavor to elevate morals of people, giving up over emphasis of materialism. 4. Diffusion of the Japanese language in the Philippines. 5. Promotion of vocational course. And 6. To inspire people with the spirit to love neighbor.
Goals. To the Japanese education has always had important goals in addition to acquisitions of academic knowledge, intellectual growth, or vocational skills. Moral education and character development are also among the central concerns. Eradicate realms of Western nations, love or labors, military training.
Post-colonial period up to present. Now, let's jump into post-colonial period. Philippines started developing educational curriculum since independence. The country gained it from American colonization way back 1946. Curriculum characteristics were influenced by the Western educational system. As time goes on, Philippine curriculum continually enhanced.
Now let's tackle the education system in post-colonial during liberation period. In this era, steps were taken to enhance the curriculum existing before the war. Many Filipino educational leaders were trying to create a curriculum, but their efforts remain in the conceptual phase. So what are the steps taken during the liberation period? First is to restore 7th grade, next is to abolish the double single session, and last is to adopt the modern trends in education taken from the United States. The curriculum remained essentially the same as before subject-centered. So, when we say subject-centered, it focuses on the content of the curriculum and it follows a more structured format.
Now, after liberation period, Philippine Republic started in 1946. The curriculum of the Philippine Republic has started to be more progressive from traditional learning. They now offer both formal and vocational learning. It now offers the education of bilingualism, vocational, Filipino literature, self-awareness, and many more. In use of vernacular language as their medium, the usage of learning materials and instructional materials has been increased.
Next one is the characteristics. The present curriculum has emerged and advanced in terms of learning outcomes. The current education offers formal and non-formal. Formal education typically spans 17 years, including 1 year in kindergarten, 6 years in primary education, 6 years in secondary, and 4 years in tertiary education that leads to a bachelor's degree. Here are the goals of education system in post-colonial periods. First is to develop and establish efficient curriculum, including the K-12 curriculum, mastering skills, and competitiveness in global scales. Next is sufficient teachers. It includes Magna Carta for teachers and LET exams.
Curriculum also aims to provide learning experience to contribute to the awareness and development of the students. And last, it also aims to promote work experience that is helped by Alternative Learning System or ALS, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA, OJTs, and work immersions.